Hello class, welcome to our lecture. So I'll be tackling the genre standards, models and approaches, basic approaches for literature.
So literature are any writings, or expression and form that, in relation to ideas of universal interest, are characteristic or essential, or has essential features, literary features such as essays, biography, history, poetry, and novels. So actually, you encounter literature every day. It represents also the culture and tradition of a language or a people. So even the ones that are not actually written are also forms of literature, such as the drama. Actually, it's written first, and then it is supposed to be, or it is written to be performed like that. Also, folk literature or oral literature. So they are not originally written, but they are passed on through the word of mouth. The literary genre is or has three classical literary forms. So these are the drama, the poetry, and the epic. And then there are also characteristics such as the style, content, and the form. So there are different literary genres. First, we have the fiction, poetry, essay, and drama. So fiction, for example, is a prose narrative that is created by the imagination. It's a work of imagination, but it can also be based on real facts, on reality. Next one, we have the poetry, which it is a pattern form of written or verbal expression of ideas. So essay, it is also prose, however, it is also creative just like fiction, but it also can be journalistic articles. Another example of an essay is the memoir. Next one is the drama. So this drama, just like what I said, is a story. Now the drama can be part prose, could also be part poetry, just like the style of William Shakespeare. But there are also many other dramatists that we know. Moving forward, we have the literary standards, and these standards are critical considerations in evaluating the substance and quality of literary work. So, meaning, this is how you evaluate the value, or the meaning of a particular work of art. So in our case, we are going to use the literary standards in order to evaluate the meaning or the value of a certain poem. So there are different literary standards. There are 7. And first one, we have the universality. When we say universality, meaning a good quality work of literature is ageless and timely, meaning it is relevant today and it speaks of universal truths. It is true, it can be true to any culture, in any time. It can appeal to people from different walks of life or from different races. Some points of, or the focus of this are, for example, about sex, about culture, and time. Next one, we have artistry. This is a characteristic which appeals to our sense of beauty. Is it artful? Like that. Is this poem artful? Do you think it's beautiful? Are the words, whether they are euphonic or cacophonic, it depends on your preference actually. For the intellectual beauty, it must stir thought. Does it make you think deeply? These thoughts and perspectives enrich our mental life through making us understand the fundamental truths towards human nature and life in general. You will know this if it stimulates your thoughts or suggestiveness. What does it suggest? Now, if the intellectual beauty is all about your thoughts, does it stimulate you intellectually? And when it comes to suggestiveness, it means, or the emotional influence of that literary work, does it evoke emotions? Does it make you feel something? So next one is a spiritual value. Does it uplift your spirit? Does it motivate you to do something? No, does it have some moral values that you can ponder on and maybe somehow tweak your moral compass? No, so it makes you reflect on about morality. When it comes to permanence, it means that no matter what generation, what decade, that particular work of art is still relevant. So each reading gives new insights and fresh delights, so it still can be significant, whatever era it is. Next one, we have the style. It is a unique way in which a writer sees life, form his or her ideas and express them. So great works are marked as much by their memorable substances as by their distinctive style. So each writer or each author has a different style in writing. For example, with Ernest Hemingway, how he writes is considered or deemed as masculine. If you read his works, parang surface lang. It's just dialogue, it's just like simple words, no? But actually, he uses the iceberg theory. It is a style used very surface, so very simple lang ang kanyang sentences or kanyang work or writings, but there is a deep meaning behind it, like that. And you also have to really dig deep to know the meaning. Next one, we have what are the questions that you might ask, that you should ask now in order to evaluate a particular literary work through the 7 literary standards. No? So you have to read, criticize, and then to write. So this challenges your critical thinking skills. No? So you have to be critical, you have to judge as an intellectual like that. And then you write what you have critiqued, if you have to put it in words. Now, these are the questions. So for the universality, ask after reading a poem, does it possess multifaceted natures for all sorts of audience? Uh, is it relevant to, for example, to like Filipinos, to like Japanese? It can also be relevant to other cultures and races. No, so next one, we have the artistry. You have to ask, does it move you? Does it make you feel something? Intellectual beauty, does it tickle your imagination? Does it make you think? Suggestiveness, what does it make you feel something? Spiritual value, does it have a moral lesson? Permanence, would it still be read and make a good reference hundreds of years from now? And lastly, the style. Does the style fascinate you? Is the style used unique? Or is it forgery? Maybe not really forgery, but adaptation. Maybe the author is just inspired, by someone else's writing style. So moving forward, we have literary models. This refers to the different aspects and importance of literary appeals. We have these literary models: the cultural model, the language model, and the personal growth models. These models are used to see if is the literary work culturally relevant? Is the literary work, or can the literary work help a learner or help you as a reader to learn more about the literal and figurative language? Another one is, does it help with the personal growth of the reader? We have the literary approaches. So these are critical considerations in evaluating the substance and quality of a literary work. So for example, we are given a poem. Let's have Edgar Allan Poe. So let's say Annabelle. First step is to read the poem. On the first level, you have to read it literally. After your first reading, you have to read it again for the figurative genre level. So that's how you have a profound knowledge on the meaning of the text. First, read it on the literal level. Next one, read it for its figurative meaning, for its figurative message. When we use the literary approach, it's like this. So after you read the Annabel Lee, you can look at it, or you can criticize it through different lenses. So we have different lenses here. This poem can be criticized through a feminist lens. It can be criticized through a psychoanalytic lens. So how is that, or how does that work? Here, for example, if you are to criticize Annabel Lee and look at it in a formalistic or literary approach, you are going to disregard, no, the life or the author's life or other factors that is out of the text. You just have to focus on what is written there. When you try to get the meaning, when you try to dig deep and evaluate it and try to understand it, you don't have to um, dig up dig up the life of the author. That is not necessary, that is not needed in formalistic or literary approach. You just have to look at the literary elements of the literary work. So just look for the symbols. What does it mean? Look at the images and the other parts of it. Does it you could also ask, if the different literary parts in that particular text have an organic um, unity. No? So kung mapansin nyo siguro, there are, if you watch a movie, you might think na at the end of it na maybe, I believe there is something missing. I'm not very satisfied watching this movie. May mga elements siya na hindi mag-connect. Ganyan, no? So for example, the theme does not really connect with the actions of the characters. So that's just one aspect in using the formalistic or the formalistic approach. So here are some questions that you might ask when you try to use the formalistic approach in a poem or a literary work. You may try to choose one or two of these questions, and then you apply it to whatever or however you have read, no? Kasi sometimes, or there are people who read literary work in a different way, no? Parang work lahi ang pagsabot sa isa ka literary work. Why? Because we try to relate it to our own experience. Maybe this poem does not really evoke feelings sa akin kasi it's not, I cannot relate to it, ganyan, or maybe I can see some flaws which compromises my satisfaction in reading that particular poem. Now, next one, we have the moral, philosophical, or humanistic approach. So in this approach, the keyword is morality or the ethical goodness or badness. No? Kasi when we say ethics, diba, what is good? This approach focuses naman on the themes, on the view of the world, moral statements, and authors' philosophy. So for example, you may read Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead. It has a deep philosophical meaning, although I don't really abide to her philosophy, which is objectivism. So if you try to criticize Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead after reading it, try to ask here, so what view of life does the story present? What character best articulates this viewpoint? Next one, we have the historical approach. Now in this approach, you have to look at the historical milieu, which is a historical situation from when that literary work was written. Either it's the time when the literary work was written or published, or you can try to examine the setting itself, no? Kasi hindi naman always na whatever the setting is of the literary work is yun din yung setting ng reality ng author, no? The author could write something that is set in the 1970s or maybe in a different space, no? It could be as science fiction like that, even in poetry, no? So it has a different setting, it has a maybe different social milieu. This approach focuses on connection of work to the historical period in which it was written. So you have, again, to look at the historical background of from which that work is written. Also try to examine the motivations of, for example, we have the fiction or the novel of Jose Rizal, the El Filibusterismo, and the Noli Me Tangere. Now, if you look at or if you read Noli Me Tangere, it does not really shout na the friars are bad, they are abusive, like that, or that we have to own our own country because it is ours and not the foreigners. Does not really explicitly say what it wants to mean or it's the message that it wants to convey. But if you try to examine its characters and its motivations, you can see that. And if you try to relate that to when it was written, you can see that actually its message is that Rizal wants the Filipinos to have their own country as their own. So next one we have the sociological approach. So this approach focuses on man's relationship to others, whether socially, politically, religiously. Ganyan. So literature is viewed as an expression of man in a given social situation. So we have this dichotomy, we have this binary opposition about society and self. So for example, how do you see yourself? Is it based on your social situation? According to Bill Nichols, how we see ourselves depends on our stand in our society. So kasi iba-iba tayo ng social situations, di ba? Or we also have different political dynamics sa ating society. Now, this approach emphasizes our the social commitment, contemporaneity, and social relevance, and it holds communication with the reader critical. You look at the society or the politics in the particular work. So the questions that you may ask when you try to use this approach is, does the story address societal issues such as race, gender, and class? What is relationship between the characters and their society? So this one is pretty general. It also talks about the class struggle. So under the sociological approach, it could be the feminist approach, and the Marxist approach can be under the sociological. Now, next one, we have the Marxist approach. It is actually pioneered. The proponent of a Marxist thinking is Karl Marx himself. So he is German thinker. This type of criticism are viewed as a product of work and whose practitioners emphasize to the role of class and ideology as they reflect, propagate, and even challenge the prevailing social order. Kasi meron tayong social hierarchy, di ba? We have the upper class, the middle class, and the lower class. So where do you think do you fall there? So there are basically different social hierarchies in every culture or in every nation. Here, for example, in the Philippines, the most of the people here are from the lower class. So these people are the working class. No, ang mga middle class, if the working class cannot work, then wala silang kakainin. No, they cannot provide for their family. While in the middle, those who are in the middle class in this nation, in the Philippines, they are kumbaga may kaya. No, so kahit hindi sila kumayod or kahit hindi sila mag-work today or for a week or for a month, meron pa rin silang kakainin. For the upper class naman, these are people who are affluent in the society, the elites, the politicians, the people who have large businesses, that these people have, for example, establishment in where those who are in the working class and maybe in the middle class work. So may mga workers sila for their establishments now. So Marx believed that the economic means of production in a society, the base, both creates and controls all human institutions and ideologies, the superstructure. Meaning, Marx believes that your social situation influences your thinking, your philosophy, the ideology in a society. So whatever is the situation of a particular nation in a society. Anyway, these are the questions that you may use in or utilizing the Marxist approach. Who are the powerful people in the text? And this is what I said, na who are the bourgeois? Who are the proletarian? Ano ang class conflict? Alright, so next one. The psychological approach. So actually, this approach has different theories. So we have, for example, the Jungian approach about the collective unconscious by Carl Jung. We also have the Freudian. The psychological approach can be used based on the theory of Carl Jung or Sigmund Freud or Alfred Adler. This particular approach results to an exhaustive psychological analysis of themes, images, symbols, characters of recurrent themes, and others. So states that there are some psychological implications that can be drawn out from this particular literature. So maybe it's the psychology of the writer, it's the psychology of the characters, it's the psychology of its creation. Bakit kaya ito ginawa? So what is the psychological aspect on that? For example, we have Edgar Allan Poe's Telltale Heart. It is not told there that the character or the narrator has an illness. Hindi naman sinabi doon explicitly na may sakit yung narrator doon. But actually, if you try to use the psychological approach, you will know that the narrator has a sickness which is obsession. Kaya niya pinatay yung old man there. Kasi meron siyang obsession, meron siyang he experiences terrible episodes of schizophrenia. These are the questions that you may ask when trying to use the psychological approach. Next one, we have the impressionistic or the reader response. So this is, I believe, the easiest literary approach that you can use in a particular work. So this method is used to expound reaction response or reader response, which is considered as very personal, relative, and prolific. So when you use this approach, it's just like a reflection, but of course you have to make it specific naman. You have to focus on one aspect or one subject matter. no? Or one literary element that is maybe intellectually beautiful for you, or maybe if it's emotionally evoking for you. These are the questions that you may ask. Next one, we have the feminist approach, which primarily focused on issues of identity, gender criticism, or the feminist approach looks at the ways characters in literary texts are exemplified. So some keywords here as the masculine and the feminine. Now, this approach, in using this, you have to look at its society and how the women are treated in the society in that particular poem. For example, do you think that the setting or the society in that poem is patriarchal? No? Kasi ang point ng feminism is to bring equality among men and women. No? So why? Bakit kaya women lang? Bakit walang menimists? Now, because the society is already a patriarchal society, and it favors the man. No matter how you look at it, it really favors the men. Feminism wants to eradicate that fear among women by focusing or advocating for their needs. You may ask these questions. How are women's lives portrayed in the work? Is the form and content of the work influenced by the writer's gender?